scope. The conference is financially supported and sponsored by IEEE Industry Application Society, USA. There are 12 tracks in the conference covering almost all areas of electronics, computer, and electrical engineering. I would now like to invite the very dynamic Mr. Dhruv Galgotia, the CEO, and the youngest one at that for an educational institution of Galgotias University for the welcome address. Dhruv, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richa. Very good afternoon to each one of you present here. We are extremely honored to have our chief guest, Professor Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary, Minister of Science and Technology, Government of India. Thank you so much, sir, for sparing your time and attending our virtual conference. Our guest of honor, Manfred, IEEE Fellow and IEEE Director-elect for Division 6, Professor Fred Blackberg, Professor, Faculty of Engineering and Science, Aalborg University, Denmark, Dr. Jan Milojic, Distinguished Technologist at HP Labs, USA, Professor S.N. Singh, IEEE Fellow at an IEEE India Council, Thomas Rizwani, Technical Director, Skoda Electric, of course, Professor Dr. Bhim Singh, IIT Delhi, Professor Paul Cunningham, Executive Director, IEEE Division 6, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us at the 2020 IEEE International Conference on Computing Technologies, GUCON 2020, to all our eminent speakers and delegates who have joined from all over the world. I convey a very, very warm welcome to you on behalf of the entire Galgotias University family. We are truly indeed honored to have each one of you present with us today. Conferences such as this, I believe, provide our faculty, our students, and all the guests with an invaluable opportunity for research and development. And listening to all the industry specialists, decision makers, to share their experiences makes this knowledge disseminating platform even more cherished. GUCON 2020 will provide an opportunity to the practicing engineers, academicians, researchers to meet in a forum to discuss various issues in the field of electrical, computing, electronics, engineering, and technologies. This conference aims to put together the experts from the relevant areas to share their knowledge and experience for the foreseeable future. This year, a total of 1,587 authors have submitted their research works from all over the world after the review process by the Technical Program Committee. And only 161 high-quality papers are going to be presented today. The participation from 21 countries across the world truly makes this conference an international one, having a global outreach. I'm extremely grateful to all the experts who have joined here, and it would have been an even greater pleasure to host all the guests at our campus. But the pandemic and the onset of the virus had other plans for all of us. But I would extend my warm invitation to all of you to visit our campus, and the university is looking forward for collaboration with you and your prestigious institutions, research, innovation, faculty, and exchange and student exchange programs. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizing committee for their hard work in putting together this plan. And I would like to thank the IEEE Industry Society USA and Ministry of Science and Technology Government for their support in making this conference possible. I encourage the delegates to participate actively in this interesting discussion over the next 3 days, and I wish this conference all the very success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your heartwarming words and the welcome words by you. Moving on further, we have the dynamic and the most charismatic personality, the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Preeti Bajaj. I now request Honorable Ma'am to kindly take over and address the session.
Secretary, Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, guest of honor, Manfred Fellow IEEE, the guest of honor, Professor Fred from the Faculty of Engineering and Science, Denmark, guest of honor, Professor S.N. Singh, Dr. Rutsky from Technical Director from the Budapest, guest of honor, Dr. Dej, Professor Bhim Singh, who is very, very supportive in every venture of Galgotias on the research, fellow IEEE, and IIT Delhi. A guest of honor, Professor and IEEE Division 6 Director-elect, our CEO, Mr. Dhruv. Very good evening, and on behalf of Galgotias University, once again, I welcome you all. The university wherein we are performing extremely well at digital front. GUCON is one of our signature conference, which has stepped in 2018, and this is third version as has been being said, and we are trying our best to be at research front. The conference, when we say IEEE conference, it itself is an indication of the quality. And if you know about the statistics, amongst 1,500 papers, just 161 we have selected. That shows how the university, along with the research team, is progressing and always believes in the quality. So in spite of this pandemic, we tried our best that although we could not host all of you in the campus, but I'm sure the virtual conference would give you equally the same satisfaction which would have been in person. We real extremely, and the conference, the complete technical committee, which has been chaired by Professor Saad, that's the conference, has set the benchmark. Professor Saad, thank you so much for taking the huge responsibility, screening all 1,500 papers, shortlisting, and finally selecting who are going to present in this conference. The IEEE conference, when we say, so the conference gives you platform wherein all researchers, students, the senior faculty, they can come together, discuss, narrate, and then, a lot of takeaways to have networking for their future reference. They get in critic, they get in the future, and also recognition. I once again welcome you all at this opening ceremony of GUCON, and this conference would give you for what you all have registered. Thank you all to be part of this conference. And Professor Ashutosh Sharma, thank you for having Ministry of Science and Technology to be one of the co-organizer for this conference. All your support which you have given and your presence really makes it, the conference to be the conference status to be very high. Thank you once again, everyone, to join over here.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a heartwarming welcome to everyone. I'm sure the panelists are more and more energetic to visit what is there in the coming sessions. Moving on further, we have Professor Saad Mekhilif, Professor of Electrical Engineering from University of Malaya and Technical Chair, IEEE GUCON 2020. He will now throw some light over the highlights of the conference. And I request sir to kindly take over.
So good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Good morning. So that's the beauty of a virtual conference. So I think in Europe we are in the morning. In India maybe it's an afternoon. Here we are in the evening. Yeah. So it is a pleasure actually to see all of you. It's a very good opportunity. Unfortunately, this year we are unable to meet physically. I would like to make a special thanks actually to the CEO and to the Vice Chancellor of the Galgotias University for their support. Actually, without your support and without your help, this conference will not be possible. And also this goes to special thanks to all the participants today. Special thanks also goes to our track chairs. Our track chairs, which has done actually a very good job, assigning the reviewers and going through the review process. It's not an easy job. I would like to thank all of them, the track chairs, the reviewers. Reviewers actually we spend a lot of time reading and commenting on the papers. And it was actually very difficult for us to make the final decisions, and especially with the high number of submissions. As mentioned previously, we only accepted 161 papers. The acceptance rate is around 56%, which is very good. And we reached a stage where we ranked the papers because it was difficult to actually to select which papers to be accepted. So I asked the track chest to rank the papers, and then based on that we select these 161 papers. It has gone through a rigorous review process and also checking. We were very strict on the similarity index and the plagiarism. Every paper that doesn't pass the threshold of 20% will not be selected and will not be recommended. I think GUCON is set to set a very high quality and standards for researchers to submit their papers. We have received the papers from more than 20 countries, which shows the conference is an internationally recognized and well-received conference. And I'm sure that we have gone through the website from 2018, where more than 800 papers received. In 2019, I was in the conference. It was a great event. We met a number of good researchers from all around the world. The same, more than also 800 papers was. And this year also, we were in a very difficult situation to decide how we are going to go. Are we going to go virtual, hybrid? But in the end, it was decided that we go virtual. And I think the good things about the virtual conference is create another avenue for us, another avenue where we can do a lot of works without doing a lot of travel, a lot of transits, wasting time in airports and so on. We can be more efficient. Okay, we can do many things online. And I hope this year, I have gone, all the presenters have already uploaded their videos, recordings. Up to this morning, we have 100% video recording submissions of all the papers. And I have gone through, many of them are very high quality recording. And this shows actually, maybe this is the trend of future conferences. Future conferences may have different trend. Maybe we have, most likely it will be hybrid. Okay, for people from different parts of the world will be able to participate. Also, I would like to highlight something very important. The fees charged was very low. This actually encouraged researchers to participate. And as indicated by the chairman and the vice chancellor, you know, this is a non-profit conference. So once again, thank you very much for the support provided. Thank you very much for the track chairs. Thank you very much for the reviewers. Thank you very much for the authors. And we look forward for the 2021 conference with very high quality papers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Next, we have a very special guest amongst us, and not a special guest, but also the chief guest of today's ceremony, Professor Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, from New Delhi, India. I now request Honorable Sir to kindly take over the session and address the gathering.
Thank you. I'm delighted that we are talking about three compelling themes of the future today together. So these are computing, power, and communication. So this is really, really great, and I should congratulate IEEE and Galgotia University, led by the very able leadership of Dr. Dhruv Galgotia and Dr. Preeti Bajaj for making it possible, and Dr. Saad, who gave a very nice introduction to the conference. So computing, power, and communication are really the pillars of what we are going to be seeing increasingly in the future. Of course, we have been seeing it for a long time, but it's about the convergence of these three technologies that would produce things which are disruptive, which are would bring in unprecedented changes. My delight and my congratulations for getting so many people together to talk about these things. Um, Long after COVID-19 has disappeared from the margins of history books, we would still have overarching challenges. These overarching challenges, and whole lot of it is about science and technology. It's about sustainable development. It's about healthcare that could reach to the last citizen anywhere, any corner of the world. It is about the rise of intelligent machines, which is going to have huge impact on our skills, on our education, on our jobs, on everything that we do. So it's really, really great. So the future, if you would, is all about the convergence of technologies. You would see that I'm not going to be talking about the technical aspects of this conference because I'm not an expert in it. I'm just a lowly chemical engineer who works in nanotechnology. So let me try to give some insights, a view from if you were to go 30 miles above Earth, if you would, to think together about what kind of future that we would be building and what is the role of these computing power and communication technologies together in it to make a better world. We talk about climate change, we talk about sustainable development, we talk about the affordable and pervasive healthcare. We talk about the rise of intelligent machines, Industry 4.0, Society 5.0, and clearly the science and technology is a strong pillar, but not the only pillar because that has to be integrated with policy measures. It has to be integrated with the regulation, right? And foremost, it has to be integrated with the will of people. So until the last person in the society is on board, these are the problems you could not address only by science and technology. This is very important for all of us to understand. Even if I'm a scientist, I have certain amount of responsibility to take that message of science to different stakeholders in the society that would make it possible. Now, today, this becomes, today, let me also recall that it's the 151st birthday of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, we may not see any relevance of that now in today's world, but actually there is. Because let me very quickly recall the historical lessons. The industry zero was all about the muscle, the brute force, and might is right. So it was controlled as a feudal societies would be controlled only by how much muscle you had. Basically, it was the days of barbarians. Industry one changed a lot of that. Industry one was based on steam power, but that basically meant that everything, the activities that we did was centralized. So you had big factories that are run by steam power, and so therefore there was a very tight control, both of state and small groups on the means of production. Um, so this was the time actually Gandhi was born. So Gandhi was looking at the impact, the lights and shadows of the technology of Industry 1.0. And of course, for much of the part of the world which did not have Industry 1 tools, for example, a whole lot of colonial world mostly saw the shadows of technology. It was only much later that when the technology became more pervasive, that different societies start to feel the impact of Industry One and the light that it offered. Industry 2.0 started with the rise of electrical power, and that's one of the things we are discussing here, electrical power, which made it possible for little things to be in our homes. So the production was no longer centralized, and the consumption also was no longer centralized. And so we could deal with electricity, power, everybody And that is what actually made possible as a foundation to be who we are today. So Industry 2.0, based on producing power, mostly coal-based, and therefore producing a lot of environmental damage and so on, and leading up to what we see today in terms of climate challenges. Industry 3.0 is something we have seen in our lifetime, right, with the rise of digital, passive digital, which means that I got something in my pocket and I got something in my hand, and that gives me unprecedented communication, and it gives me some computing, which is right here in my pocket as well, and the rise of internet and the rise of all the other computing tools, supercomputers going forward, and so on. Uh, Industry 3.0, which is what I call passive digital cyber, if you would. I call it passive because it's still controlled by me. In a sense, it's not really part of me. It's a little bit out there, but I can leverage it in many, unprecedented ways for doing my computing, doing my communication and stuff. I remember when I was just before I was an undergrad, starting in the mid 70s. Before that, there was a thing called slide rule. My father, who was an engineer, he worked with slide rule, right? So that was before, if you would, Industry 3.0, and what a huge impact that it has really had for our young people today in our classrooms. They absolutely cannot understand the world that you lived in the 50s until 50s, 60s, and so on, which is as well. Now we are into Industry 4.0. Up to an Industry 3, things are controlled by the flow of materials and the flow of energy, especially in the form of fossil fuel energy. Industry 4.0 is controlled by the flow of data, information, and knowledge. So we must add to it the controlling and understanding the flow of materials and flow of energy. We add to it another compelling dimension, which controls everything else. So it doesn't matter if it's material, anything physical, basically is down towards the bottom of the pyramid, if you would, of knowledge. Starting from measurements to data, to information, to knowledge, and hopefully going forward in the future, some amount of wisdom that you would distill from information. Because information and data management has become a huge problem today. In fact, when I was doing PhD, and many of the people here, our distinguished speakers, we remember reading maybe 3 journals in the hard copy, and that pretty much told us actually what we needed to know. Not anymore today. So what that means is that there is an explosion, an exponential growth of information, especially if not knowledge. So it produces a great deal of stress in resolving this paradox about overly burdened system of information, data, measurements, and some amount of knowledge. And how do you actually get something useful out of it? And so I'm sure that going forward in the future, the whole the business of scientific publishing is going to undergo very fundamental changes about how we do research, how do we publish it, how do we access it, and how do we make sense out of it. So clearly here, even artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of that is going to have a huge impact in all of these aspects. But let me not get carried away by that, which is a very interesting and fascinating subject to discuss. By saying, okay, let's conclude this by saying here we are in Industry 4.0, which is all about the convergence of technologies. So while we worked in silos, I always said I was a chemical engineer, I was a nanotechnologist, or whoever, and people said that they were physical chemist and organic chemist and what have you. All of that is making less and less sense going forward. This may make sense for undergraduate teaching, but it's not going to make sense for solving problems. So really, we are looking at two layered structure of knowledge today. one which is undergrad teaching, and the other which is what we call research, but no longer a research which is totally compartmentalized in silos. So what is this convergence? Well, it's the convergence of physical and cyber. So materials, now you call them smart materials, advanced materials, you call them stimuli responsive materials, call them what you want, it doesn't really matter. And I'm sure going forward in the future, we will have conscious materials. So, we'll have a lot more ConMet conferences, if you would, right, and all of that. But materials, mechanisms, devices, communication, perception in the form of sensors, computing, autonomous decision making, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and autonomous action, which is all sorts of actuators. So it's basically a bundle of these things, which is going to be is becoming more pervasive, but it's going to become more personal, which means no longer passive. And going forward in the future, if you were to look at the contours of Industry 5.0, whenever that comes, people often ask that question, okay, what after Industry 4.0, even though we have not exhausted the possibilities of Industry 4.0, but it's good to think about future a little bit to be prepared for it. Industry 5.0, I hypothesize that it would be a convergence of biological with cyber and physical and digital. So the last frontier, if you would, is integrating life and biology into all the things that we consider external to ourselves. And there are great strides being made as we talk about this, the very bold and courageous future, if you would. But anyway, you should have another IEEE conference on that, right? Because it's so simply fascinating. I'll just very quickly tell you about what Department of Science and Technology in India is doing about these things. Even though I recognize fully that this is a global conference, but just to give you some hints, we started a program in cyber physical systems last year. It's worth about $500 million, and if you factor in purchase power parity, then it's closer to $1.5 billion, which is setting up different hubs in all the stuff that is robotics, is data, is IoT, is machine learning, whole lot of different things, and their applications in different sectors like health, education, transport, energy, water networks, and all of that, all the usual suspects. Then there's another mission in offering now in couple of months, which is worth more than $1 billion, which is on quantum technologies. So quantum technologies, of course, not only about quantum computing, which is still some way off, and I'm, to tell you the truth, not so greatly optimistic about that. Of course, it's going to generate some new knowledge. It's going to generate very good fundamental new knowledge. But going even forward, quantum communication certainly is a low-hanging fruit. Quantum algorithms, quantum cryptography, quantum devices, quantum sensors, and what have you. So this is a really brave new world in there. Another mission coming up is electric mobility and electric storage, because there's a greater emphasis on renewables. India has a big commitment on renewables, especially wind and solar power. A whole lot of it is photovoltaics. But what that means is that you need smart grids, and so that's related to power. But smart grids and microgrids, because there are a whole lot of places in Himalayas, in Northeast, whole lot of places which are not connected to a main grid. So that if we were to use renewables there, a microgrid would actually empower them. And can you hear me? Just nod your head. Okay, wonderful, because there was a little bit of fluctuation here, it seemed to me, on bandwidth. Okay. It feels very odd if you just go on talking and you are really off the grid, right? And then you say, hey, what's going on here? Okay, so so these things are of great interest to us. We have set up big missions on things like smart grid, the off-grid homes. But And there's also a whole lot of international collaboration which is going on in this, especially with US and UK are the two names that come to my mind, looking at a whole lot of things related to power. Now, another mission, which is a supercomputing mission, which is related to your computing aspects. Now, about first 10 supercomputers, petaflop range, have been assembled in India. Next phase is to design the chip. Of course, we do not manufacture chips, but you can have a good architecture and all the rest of it, on the board level and integration. At the same time, we are putting in research programs in exascale computing, both in terms of architecture as well as in terms of the applications. So you have to produce a large number of scientists who would be able to use these resources. And of course, the storage, which is grid wide. That's a huge, huge challenge. And how do you do it with a sustainable way? Finally, if you were to do the life cycle analysis of renewables, if you would take into account the storage, taking into account the death of panels and their recycle and so on, then you really have to compute about what is the net worth of the clean energy. It may not look as attractive as it does if you only look at the production aspect, for example. It's still better, but one has to do this very deep analysis about the life cycle analysis and the nexus aspect of it. Everything in the world today cannot be viewed in isolation, so it's all about nexus. So when we talk about agriculture, we talk about water. When we talk about water, we talk about energy and power. When we talk about any of this, we talk about communication, we talk about computing in terms of IoT and controls and everything that goes in there. I'll give you an example of the convergence of technologies. We know that cleaning up river Ganga is a big deal. That everybody wants it. How do you actually real time have a map of pollutants going down Ganga and where they are coming from? So you cannot have any interventions unless you know very clearly the point sources, the distributed sources, where does it come, where does it go, what happens to it. So we're working on making these smart pebbles. This is a very nice program, a consortium program with about 3 or 4 US universities and equal number of Indian universities and industry, and Intel is a 50-50 partner in it. It's basically about making these smart pebbles, small chips that have onboard sensors, at the same time got onboard power. So you know that, of course it has to be a chip which consumes very small power, and it must have onboard communication. And you got thousands of these pebbles, tens of thousands of these pebbles distributed all over, and then they are sending all this data, arm load of data somewhere. So this poor back end operation, it has to make use of machine learning to make some sense out of this map of data, which is coming in at faster and faster, just like the future at us, and then make sense and have control strategies and communication strategies. Another very interesting project going on is hyperspectral imaging, which is mounting sensors, of course, on satellites, but also mounting them on drones, so that by measuring different frequency spectrum, you can tell everything about the health of the crop, health of the soil, whether it needs water, does it need fertilizer, does it need to be cut, what have you. Making all these decisions at the right time, at the right speed, would become possible with this. So these technologies are already available, but you have to refine them and put them in practice at large scale. So all of this is going to happen. Anyhow, there was a point was made here that the way we are meeting today, this is about democratization of science. I am so glad. I'm not glad about COVID-19 virus, but I'm glad about some of the changes that it brings. Imagine in the good old days, the good old normal that people want to go back to, and I keep asking them, what part of normal do you want to go back to? I mean, I'm happy with some aspects of it. It saves me a lot of travel. It saves me a whole lot of things. I'm not saying everything is good. So you have to clearly see what new technologies based on computing and communication would become available so that the life going forward in the future becomes simpler. So if you start with the kind of conference we are having, it's completely two-dimensional. I mean, this technology has not changed in the last 15 years, starting from Skype. We are basically Skype people, right? So now, if this were to be so pervasive, we must have some real experience. I mean, in a conference, you want some, experiential things. You want certain kind of experience, and not only this flat two-dimensional experience in which you see three people, right? There's a human, very deep desire in human brain to connect with people, right? And you see, people often ask about what is the right technology for the future. I give them a simple answer. I say, look, examine your desires. Examine the desires of the mind, unfulfilled needs and desires, right? And any technology that would address that would be a big hit. And so we have the example right here. And you can imagine going in the future, we need actually a technology that would put us all together as interactive 3D avatars. If it's a hologram, it doesn't really matter. I'm not talking about the actual technology. I'm only talking about what is needed in order to have an experience which is an interactive avatar, 3D, and sitting in a place that I recognize. And in fact, to be able to see all these people in an auditorium, if you would, and sitting there and talking to them in a virtual, immersive world. So the key points here is immersion in the experience, the reality of experience, and then how do you deliver it to the participants and people. I am sure that there must be breakneck speed work on what we are talking about. I hope that there is. If it is not, then it must start, with the speed and scale, because this is all our future. And so bits and pieces of technologies are available now to be able to do this. But how do you make them so pervasive, so scaled up, and so inexpensive, and so without glitches, right? So this is all about bandwidth of communication. For example, sending data out. 5G has gone some way in that direction, but you would need even faster data rates to have a live experience of that kind. Um, I realize, I think that maybe I've taken longer than was assigned to me. So we should wind it down, except to say, look, data. I started talking about data, and often I hear people call data the new oil. I think is absolutely wrong. Okay. The thing I think is absolutely wrong is because oil is not that important. And going in the future, it's going to disappear and there's going to be less dependence on oil. Data, on the other hand, is something which is going to be with us forever. So therefore, I propose that data is new water. Okay, you could not live without water, and this is the essence of life, and data actually would be as compelling aspect of our life as water and air. So of course I don't like to call data new air, because air is something people don't really acknowledge its presence, because everywhere it's on demand, everything. So maybe water it is. How are we going to make a world using computing, using communication, using power, responsible use of all of these, and evolving them in a direction which leads to a sustainable world? I just leave you with all the younger people. We would not be around to see that world, but a whole lot of younger people who join us today in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s, they would see a world which is very different. And you have to be fully prepared for this world and the challenges, and see what are the new opportunities coming from there. We often accept very easily, saying, look, okay, 3 degrees Celsius temperature rise by the end of the century. What does it mean? It means horrible things. It means that your coastal cities like Mumbai, Calcutta, and Chennai would be underwater, that your crops would actually fail, that the food security would be under tremendous stress. Make no mistakes about it. No, it doesn't matter who says what. It's not a lip service. Okay. I've done every possible simulation and the war gaming to see what happens on this. So it is no longer acceptable to simply say, look, by the end of the century, 3 degrees. And what about the next 5 centuries? So the world is not here for 1 century. So if that planning is not factored in our culture today, then I'm afraid that our technology has failed us and the world that is going to come. So let's keep in mind as scientists that we also have responsibility not only in our labs, but even outside of our labs, and the society at large, indeed. And so I conclude by saying, of course, I keep saying I conclude, but I really going to conclude now. There's a new science, technology, and innovation policy in India coming up now, 2020. So Science, Technology, Innovation Policy 2020. We are going to factor in very strongly all these aspects about convergence, about connectedness, about how you connect science to society at large, including industry and startups. How do we complete the knowledge chain? You see, it's not about working in silos and isolation anymore to solve problems which are real. Problems of poverty, problems of malnutrition, all of those are scientific problems. They got scientific aspects in them, but we don't recognize it. We don't recognize it because we are not connected. And to how to bring out that connections very strongly is one of the focus areas of the policy. So thank you very much indeed, Dr. Bajaj, Dr. Galgotia, Dr. Saad, everybody who joined us today. I am so sorry I did not talk about the science and technology of power. If I knew, I would have. So my apologies about that. And thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a marvelous peroration. It was an honor to have you amongst us. Next, we have our guest of honor, Manfred Fred J. Schindler, from FIEEE, independent consultant and chief technology officer in Anlotech Limited and AIEEE director electrical for Division 4. I now request sir to kindly take over and proceed with the session.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organizers of GUCON, the leaders of the university, and to all the honored guests. I served a few years ago as the chair of the IEEE Conferences Committee, so I thought it would be interesting to talk about conferences in general and see how it relates to what we're going through today, including in GUCON. So I'm just going to go over a little background in conferences, especially with IEEE conferences, talk a little bit about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the challenges that we see. Some of them are quite obvious and we've already heard about. And there are some silver linings, some kind of benefits. Really don't want to use that term, but you know, there are advantages to the changes that we've been forced to make. So let's take a look at some of those. Then I want to talk about some concerns that maybe aren't so apparent. So just looking at IEEE conferences for the past 10 years or more, IEEE has sponsored about 1,500 conferences per year. About half of those are financially sponsored by the IEEE, and the other half are technically sponsored. So financially sponsored by another organization, another nonprofit, for example, a university, and then IEEE then supports the technical program. These conferences take place all around the world, and in recent years we've seen growth in a number of areas where technology leadership is emerging. India is one of those areas where we've seen a considerable amount of growth over the last 10 years or so in conference activity. Looking at the kind of conferences we see, most are primarily academic events. So these are opportunities for students and academics to present their work primarily to each other. And a characteristic of these conferences is that the number of attendees is roughly equal to the number of presenters. And the primary objective here is to publish academic work, get them posted in, for example, our library. I'm not to say that's the only motivation, but it's one of the primary motivations in such academic conferences. A minority of conferences feature strong industry participation. And I'll note that I've spent my entire career in industry, so I'm highly motivated to make sure that industry participation is a key feature in conferences for a bunch of reasons. But one of the key features you'll see in conferences with strong industry participation is the number of attendees is usually much larger than the number of presenters. We'll find the technical programs are much more varied. So instead of just having presentations of people's work, we'll also have workshops and short courses and tutorials and demonstrations, things that help our professionals in industry learn and further their careers. Networking opportunities are imperative in industry, strong industry conferences. Imperative and plentiful. It's not to say that that's not also a feature of academic conferences, it certainly is, but it's much more of a key feature in conferences that have a strong industry participation. And then finally, large exhibits are often a feature in conferences with strong industry participation. And once again, that's not exclusive to these conferences. I've been to heavily academic conferences that have significant exhibits associated with them. These exhibits tend to be of companies that have services and components that that academics may want to use rather than what industry wants. So that's kind of the background of conferences and general and IEEE conferences in particular. So then we get to this year and the COVID-19 pandemic, which has really affected us all. Looking at the latest data on cases, and I just looked it up at the Johns Hopkins University website, which compiles data from around the world. So, we find ourselves now with, 34 million cases around the world. The two countries with the largest number of reported cases are the United States with over 7 million and India with over 6 million. Worldwide, we've seen over 1 million deaths. So significant impact on everyone's lives around the world. And as you've seen, a significant impact of conferences. So, starting last February, some conferences were forced to make some very quick decisions. Conferences that were taking place in certain places in February and then in March had to decide whether to cancel, postpone, go hybrid, go virtual, or try to do some combination of these things. And combinations, for example, were conferences that were taking place in early March would opt to postpone, so they had more time to decide what to do. There were conferences taking place much later in the year that postponed just so that they had time to work out the logistics of doing a virtual conference. This struggle with how to manage conferences will continue certainly through 2021 until the pandemic has wound down. As others have already noted, hybrid will almost certainly be the dominant model for most conferences going forward. Certainly when there are travel restrictions, convening a local group that can meet in person and allowing others in remote areas is a good approach. There are challenges, obviously, with people from around the world attending and in lots of different time zones. So pre-recorded material is generally a feature. But for people that are meeting together, obviously there need to be functions that physically attend. So And it's certainly possible that some conferences will permanently adopt a virtual format, and we've heard from some conference organizers that that's what they intend to do, and we will see how this all evolves. I don't have a crystal ball. So silver linings. So are there some side benefits that we've seen? So obviously most conferences have opted for a virtual format in this year. Most of these conferences have reduced their fees, changed the registration categories, making it easier for people to afford to attend. Many conferences are experiencing record registration. Some conferences opted for free registration for non-authors in particular. That sounds very attractive for people, so they register. That doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as record participation. When it's free to register, it's easy to register, but that doesn't mean if you're busy, you will actually attend. So that's something that we've also seen. So we can't forget the value of a conference and making sure that people recognize that value. And paying a fee, even a nominal fee, helps encourage people to recognize there is value to a conference. The virtual conferences certainly remove some barriers to participation with the reduced cost, and time isn't lost traveling, as we've already heard. And so is this an opportunity to engage with broader communities? I would say that perhaps this is an opportunity to encourage industry professionals to participate in conferences that had previously been primarily academic. There certainly is content in academic conferences that professionals in industry can make use of, but there are other things that conferences can provide that industry values, and these can be panels of experts, workshops on specific topics, etc. So I encourage conferences to take advantage of the situation we're in and look at developing content that might increase the communities that participate in conferences. So there are some areas for concern, especially in a virtual conference world, and perhaps things that we haven't all thought of. But there may indeed be a temptation to relax quality and scope in conferences. Excuse me. Since people can more easily participate in a conference and don't need to travel to a conference, we can certainly try to attract more people to conferences. And in many ways that's a good thing, but we need to make sure that maintaining quality is paramount, and keeping conferences within a reasonable scope is important. And I don't say this lightly, because we certainly have seen issues with quality and scope in conferences in lots of different places, and especially those where conference involvement is growing. So key is the peer review process and understanding what the peer review process requires. IEEE policy requires that each paper be reviewed by at least two people. Certainly best practice is to have at least three. And the other thing that needs to be recalled is that the papers need to be reviewed by two subject matter experts of that paper. And when a conference decides to let papers that are outside of the nominal scope be part of the conference, often there's a challenge to making sure that there are actually two subject matter experts for each paper. And reviewers' self-assessments of their expertise isn't always accurate. And we do indeed see papers, including pseudoscience papers, coming in through conferences when the scope isn't closely controlled. There are also many conferences that are charging a higher registration fee to authors and presenters, and this makes a lot of sense. It's justified because of the cost of developing a technical program, and and the authors get an additional value in being able to publish that regular attendees don't get. So that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and I'm certainly not arguing against it. But it does start to make conference look a lot like an open access model, but it's not. The material when it gets posted in Explore is not free for all to see. And if open access conferences do become more common, and there are indications that they may, then there will be fees associated with just order processing that is required in order to get something into Explorer, since there's no revenue from people and libraries access to it. So that's just a caution, something we need to worry about in the future. And then, of course, giving free registration to non-authors, people that aren't presenting, does jeopardize the, as I mentioned before, the perceived value of a conference. And we do want people to see value in conferences. We do want people to actually participate in conferences. And as we've already heard, with virtual conferences, we have lost the opportunity for informal discussions and networking. And networking is great for lots of different reasons, but I don't want to forget informal discussions. So when you present a paper, there's always a question and answer period. A little more difficult to do in a virtual format, but certainly possible. But what I've also often found valuable is the opportunity to speak with an author, or when I'm an author, to have someone speak to me later on in an informal setting, and then we can really get into some of the technical details that were in the paper and there wasn't time to present, and so that can be lost. There are ways to simulate some of that, but it's still relatively stilted. So I believe the hybrid format is going to be the short-term solution to that, and whether technology can find us ways around that, it's something that remains to be seen. So with that, just let me summarize. Obviously, 2020 has been a very challenging year for conference organizers, and I think overall they've done very, very well. They've worked very, very hard. 2021 will certainly bring new challenges, and maybe 2022 is the start of a steady state new normal. The challenges have been there for all conferences. Certainly the challenges have been there for GUCON 2020. I congratulate you for putting together a fine virtual program this year, and look forward to you navigating the remaining challenges of this year and challenges in the coming years as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a brilliant deliverance, and thank you so much for sparing your valuable time with us. Moving on further, we have another guest of honor, Professor Fredev Blackberg from the Faculty of Engineering and Science, Aalborg University, Denmark. I request sir to kindly take over and proceed with the session.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Also me, Fredev Blackberg from Aalborg University, I would like to congratulate you for this event. And I can see you have been working very, very hard in very difficult conditions to make this happen. And a little bit like the previous speakers talking about how we do conference today. I think we are in a, let's say, a situation where we have to do transition, and this transition going from being physical meetings to virtual meetings, this is something we need to adapt, and we have to accept it. And then we have progressively to learn step by step how we get the maximum benefit out of it, because in general I would say the physical meetings, they are the places where you also socialize and you get new contacts. And how do we do this in the future? And that's of course also something IEEE is discussing in general. How can we make those meetings more fruitful? But we learn it more and more, and I think in 1 year to come, we really have very powerful concepts in order to do those things. On the other hand, we can also say that by making things virtual, this is also a great opportunity for many more to be able to attend such events because they don't have to fly. And that means you can call in globally in order to make a conference like this happening. In respect to the conference theme, I will say that this is really a state of this is really state of the nations around the world to come up with new ways of doing energy technology which are efficient, which are sustainable, and we need a lot of technologies being in play in order to solve the challenge we have in terms of energy demand and carbon reduction. And if we look at different countries, we see that they become almost every year more and more ambitious, and they will, in the next many years to come, invest in technology infrastructure in order to have a more sustainable society. So therefore, the conference here, as I see the program, will come up with new solutions and bring us the next step forward in order to make the future societies, for example, India, but also my country, Denmark, and other countries around the world. I think that is I want to say, and I look forward to do my presentation tomorrow. And I wish you a very good conference, and hope that many will attend despite the situation we are in. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. It was a pleasure to have you amongst us. Moving on further, we have our another guest of honor, Dr. Thomas Rusiani, Technical Director from GAN Skoda Electric Limited, Budapest, Hungary. I now request Honorable Sir to kindly take over the session.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, dear attendees of GUCON 2020 inaugural session, let me welcome you on behalf of the IEEE Industry Application Society Meeting Department. My name is Tamás Zsuzsányi, and I came from the industry. My company is member of the Skoda Transportation Group, which is producing electric vehicles for railway and urban transport applications. Personally, I'm working on battery buses, which is for different Hungarian cities. I have been IEEE member for more than 2 decades, and I am serving the IEEE Industry Application Society as volunteer for more than 10 years. Actually, I am a member of the IES Executive Board as the chair of the meetings department. My duty is to keep contact with the organizers of conferences sponsored by IES. I try to help them provide support in the application fees, working on the approval of conferences, and giving feedback also for the IEEE IES leadership. Fred had a very good overview previously about the IEEE conferences, so I don't want to have any overlapping. So I just want to have a short speech directly about the IES conferences. So the number of IES-sponsored conferences increased during the last some years, and yearly we had 60, 70 conferences sponsored technically or financially in a year. Unfortunately, the number of IES-sponsored conferences decreased significantly in 2020 because some conferences were cancelled or moved to 2021 due to the pandemic. Since the March of 2020, all the organized conferences changed to their form to virtual. Altogether, there were 32 due to the limited traveling possibilities and restrictions. Now there are still 12 conferences that haven't decided how to proceed, but I think they also have to take the decision very soon to change the form. Actually, it seems to be that they want to have a face-to-face conference, but I don't believe that it will be successful. The change, as Fred told, the change to virtual is a very hard task for the conference organizers because they have to modify the participation conditions, redesign the conference schedule, taking into consideration the time differences, revise the conference budget. They have to select the communication platform within a very short time. But I can say, based on the feedbacks, most of the conferences overcome these difficulties and they were successful finally. IEEE provided a significant help for this process. In the previous years, the highest number of IS conferences took place in the United States. In India, let me tell you some figures, some numbers concerning India. There were just 6-7 conferences in a year, and mostly 1 or 2 of them was financially co-sponsored by IES. In 2022, the situation changed significantly in spite of the pandemic. The number of conferences sponsored by IES increased to double. So this year there are 13 conferences supported by IES. 8 of them is technically and 5 financially sponsored by IES, including GUCON as well. The cooperation with GUCON started in 2019. IES was invited to be a technical co-sponsor. And then I worked together with Professor Rabindra. He is the engine of these conferences. I appreciate very much his accuracy and his end users. The conference 2019 was very successful, and now we are working on the upcoming conferences. The involvement of IES increasing in the GUCON 2020. IES is 25% financial co-sponsor, and in the 2021, IES will be 100% financial co-sponsor. The popularity and the number of attendees are increasing conference by conference, so I can say that the GUCON is getting to be one of the leader conferences in the region. So I wish a successful conference with 2020, and I hope that 2021 we can meet face to face again. Thank you. This was my speech. Thank you so much. So if you need any help or information about the conferences, please contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for being a part of it and sparing your valuable time with us. It was an honor to have you amongst us. Moving on further, we have another guest of honor, Dr. Dijan Milovic, FIEEE, a distinguished technologist from Hewlett-Packard Labs, USA. I request Honorable Sir to kindly take over the session.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for hosting me. I would also like to point out that I was invited to be here last year, but unfortunately I couldn't make it because of the conflict. So thanks for sticking with me. I decided to show some slides within the 10-minute slot that I was awarded here. And I would like to give some broader perspective of how things are today, where they're going. And then I would like to do a call for action by giving you some examples of what we are doing that almost anyone can do. IEEE is well known for conferences, publication, standards, but we can do much more, and we can do things in a little bit different way than we used to do them. So as you know, today pandemics has created really huge stress on the whole mankind, humankind, its existence, values, daily lives. First, in terms of the life of people who are endangered, with the millions of people who are dying, close to million now, and then hundreds of millions who are infected. But there are other issues in global economy, privacy versus societal benefits, global work organization, which completely changed supply chain logistics, and many others. And then it also forced acceleration of digital transformation for work, how we do education, private life, even this conference that we're doing remotely. So in summary, technologies increasingly play this crucial role in all of this, and they truly became essential for our survival. And as they say, necessity is mother of invention. So in many cases, Zoom improved dramatically in terms of security, performance, and other things. And then, as I said, IEEE is doing all these traditional efforts, and we're pretty good at that. Tomorrow, we can see that some of the industries are and will be severely impacted, and I don't think we can do anything about it. Transportation, especially air, cruises, taxis, Lyft, Uber, etc., they all suffered. Oil and gas, because of the lack of travel, also went down. And then tourism, hospitality, accommodation industry, etc. People are laid off, put on furlough, and generally affected. But then there are some technologies and approaches that are applicable across all industries, and they include AI, machine learning, deep learning, cybersecurity, disaster recovery, etc. And digital transformation is taking place in general and broadest sense for all of these, and it's being increasingly improved. And countries like India, I think, could be drivers because of the large scale of population, because of conditions over there. Some things are extremely well developed, others are not. So they can leapfrog in many aspects. We have today this membership pool with about 100,000 members. I'm talking about IEEE, of which 40K are very active. We have about 4 million engaged members. Those are who publish in conferences like this but are not members. But then in the world, there's about 18 million engineers who are not members, not all of them. Then we have about 28 million programmers who can also be members. And then, as we've seen in the beginning, our respectful Ashutosh opened up saying he is chemists. There are many others, physicists, lawyers, doctors, mathematicians, economists, all of whom practice what we do at IEEE. They could all potentially be engaged either as members or as contributors. And that's the pool that we need to engage and show to them that they can work with us. Especially these two classes are, I think, important. I would like to give you a few examples what you can do beyond doing conferences and publications. We've been doing with Computer Society for about 10 years now, technology predictions. What we do is we gather a number of people, I'll show you who these are, and we try to predict technology that will be successful next year or next few years. And it's pretty hard thing to do. Predicting future is never easy. There's a huge degree of uncertainty, guessing, and luck. It is important and hard because it's not only about technology, but also about business. You need a business acumen to understand what will imply that something will happen or not happen. And a lot of times there's a lot of fashion, and distinguishing from true trend, it's not trivial. We've done all kinds of things, including publications, but also we've done press releases and some non-conventional things like blogs, writing 2022 reports, which was extremely successful. It was a basis for 2 consecutive strategic reports for Computer Society, a bunch of competitions, etc. So here are examples for the past 4 years, our predictions. And what we do is at the end of the year, we do the scorecard of how well we did. And I don't expect you to read all of this. What I want to point out that we were successful in certain cases, like with virtual reality, and there's a string of successes which evolved over the years. But then we weren't successful in some others. And usually it's not because technology was bad or, it wasn't successful from the technology perspective, but because simply market wasn't there to accept it. And then in other cases, we were good in 1 year in prediction, other year we weren't good. So for example, digital currencies are taking off again, but they weren't at those times. Here are some of the predictions that we've done for 2020. I'm not expecting you again to read these, just I'm flashing it so that you can see. And these three appeared, we published a special issue of IEEE Computer in December, and these three papers and also these three papers appeared there. We compared, and here's a little bit more detail about AI machine learning applied to cybersecurity prediction. We're also running a grand challenge for this that should take place next year. And we compared these predictions in terms of impact, likelihood, and our prediction confidence. Here's the team of the people. These are all extremely reputable people at the level of chief technologists or vice presidents with deep understanding of both technology and business. Here are technology predictions at the times of pandemics. I put them in a stack here, and I put high performance computing at the top because many things like simulation of vaccine and many others really depend on that. And we will have this special issue on technology predictions again. The paper submission is due on 1st of December. I also want to point out one conference, which is industry conference by industry and for industries taking place next week. We have a number of keynotes, again, from industry, and then a participation. You can see presenters from Twitter, Microsoft, Intel, and new companies such as WeWork, Shutterstock, Mentor, and some universities as well. So help us create a better tomorrow, and thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative session. It was a pleasure to have you, sir.
It's my pleasure to be here, and thanks to Ambidra for being a really engine, as Tamas just pointed out earlier.
Thank you so much, sir. Next, we have the guest of honor, Professor Bhim Singh from FIEEE from Indian Institute of Technology, New Delhi. I now request Honorable Sir to kindly take over the session.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, because this is an international conference and it's going to be virtual. So people are around the globe, I would like to certainly probably Professor Asutosh Sharma, who has been the chief guest, then Mr. Dhruv Galgotia, Professor Bajaj, then Dr. Fred Snyder, then we have Professor Fred Blackberg, Professor Singh, Professor Thomas, Professor Dejan, well, Professor Cunning, and Professor Pradeep, and Professor virtually out of all the delegates as well as the volunteers, heavy volunteers. It's a great opportunity for me to be with you here. I consider at the conference, I was listening to all the previous speakers about different part of the conference, but you can understand these are all enforcement on us, what probably the nature or probably the weather or whatever you call it, the epidemic has force on us. So I'd like to congratulate the Galgotia University and the organizers and the team of organizers, especially Professor Saad, who had taken a very courageous step for going ahead with the conference, but it has given a great opportunity to the researchers. If you look from the researcher point of view or the student point of view, what was Dr. Saad was talking about, you can think about, in such an environment when you are not probably supposed to interact or go or physically, then a lot of frustration or the depression comes in the mind of people, and especially it's very dangerous for the young people. So we have to really, what Professor Asutosh Sharma also talk about, that we have to cultivate this young generation, and this is the one of the best way we can think about a virtual conferences, and it has given a very good opportunity for the young researcher. I have attended probably more than 100 conferences of the IEEE, and I found many speakers, probably they might have not probably gone through, but this has given the opportunity to the young researchers that they have to record their half an hour presentation, and they have to go at least couple of times to their presentation virtually to see how they have delivered their presentation and then improve it and improve it. So that has given them opportunity in little different way, I mean, to improve them. Like, I mean, even probably after a lot of experience, if we listen our own speech, I mean, we find, I mean, many of the lacunas there, or the chances of improvement, I will call it like. So this is giving a very great opportunity. All the, let's say, presenter of the large number of presenters, around maybe 161 papers are there. Those who are, I mean, what Professor Saad already talk about, like, okay, they got all the presentation with the recorded, probably their speech on the presentation, but you can understand how pleasant it gives the environment to them. And apart from that, I mean, maybe that probably the previous speaker or the part of the our IEEE team, I mean, I have been associated probably for IEEE more than couple of decades, and probably last 1 decade I have been a fellow. So, I mean, we are interacting in different way, but this has given a good opportunity from IEEE to the young researcher to present their work in such a conference in little different way, but coming out with the, you can call it like a very bad situation of the epidemic. Like, I mean, so this is something I like to congratulate to the organizer. I mean, about the typically of such event. I mean, coming out of innovative way to the conferences and engage them, especially the young blood who are the future for us. I mean, we may not be there, what Professor Asutosh Sharma says, maybe after probably decade or so, but they will be driving the chain. So we have to vibrate them. We have to really put them, and they are more happy that they have to pay less money, and probably their research work will be documented, and they will be presenting, or they already made the probably their presentation speech in very cautious way or improved way. Like, I mean, in place of probably going to be, and like, of course, it cannot give all the benefit what already talk about the probably from IEEE officials about the physical conferences, that it give a lot of interaction and all that. So something will be missing, but we have to look positive aspect of this, how really the authors are benefited or the research are benefited from such conference, like also, and probably of course saving their time also. We should say, say not only saving the money but saving the time and other things. Like, as far as coming to the conference theme, I will consider it's a very good conference. I would like to congratulate in the series. This is the third one, probably Galgotias University is putting up, and they are coming out of the way. Really, they really talking about IEEE. They have recognized that because a lot of they are probably part of engineering or other discipline. I mean, the IEEE, which covers the large number of discipline. I mean, here also we have a computer communication as well as the electrical power, and especially is co-sponsored by industry applications, which is a backbone for such a large country like subcontinent India, which have a requirement, very huge requirement because of a very high population. And we expect the industry are going to forward, and probably the technology are supposed to go to the industry also of this. Like, I was probably delivering some of other conference, the typically my history regarding the electric vehicle in which we start working, but you can understand, I mean, the other technologies like mechanical engineers are very concerned that if we put an electric vehicle, I mean, their identity are really stake. But I can tell you very interestingly, I told, look, we are the people. We are not in the appearing anywhere. I mean, it is your vehicle. You are going to develop anything. What we are going to replace it, your internal combustion engine, which have a 40 to 45 efficiency, we are going to increase the motor efficiency in this around 90%, which is double the efficiency, and showing not only the double the efficiency, but apart from that, we have a chances here around 40 to 50% regeneration. So we will be recovering that energy, putting back, which it becomes very important for the metropolitan city like Delhi or such large metropolitan city in the world, that this pollution, which otherwise could be going in other sense into small particle, I mean, it's not going to like probably getting converted back energy into the battery. And of course, it's energy coming from the chemical energy, which is like either battery or you can call it petrol or diesel or gasoline, which was running earlier the vehicle. So its shape is not going to change. It's only all mechanical. I mean, most of the everything mechanically there. So we have to work with them to improve the product, which we call it now today electric vehicle. And I can tell you why it becomes very relevant such a conference for India, because our federal government have decided to go by 2030 that all vehicle will be electric vehicle. Like, another major push why, I mean, like, it's a renewable energy, the theme, one of the theme of the conference in which you can understand India coming big way, that will be going probably the solar and probably the wind, what Professor Asutosh Sharma, our chief guest mentioned today. You can understand the solar is, we have at the moment solar in India, even Indian rupees around 2 rupee 34 paisa. I mean, like probably tomorrow it might be reducing further, as in Middle East already, it's already equivalent to like Indian 1 rupee per unit. Like, I mean, you can understand tomorrow maybe the fuel charges will further reduce. It is going to be 1/5 or 1/6 already, and further it will reduce, so it may become around 10%. So there are plenty of technology in the preview of this conference, on which will be probably the most of the authors and the researcher will be deliberating in the next 3 days. I mean, you can think about the technology related to home appliances. Okay, like you have a lot of revolution in lighting system. Okay, a lot of revolution probably maybe other appliances like fan, like of course typically kind of the grid, I mean handling the grid, and then renewable energy conversion. And what Professor Sharma was mentioning, he is not from the electrical background. In spite, he is mentioning that we have a very heavy need for coming of the microgrid, and like a not only smart grid but the microgrid. We have a large population and large area of the India, but of course not so much equivalent to like maybe North America. I mean, like, but population is certainly much larger, which require a very heavy need of this all, not only electricity, cheap electricity generation, but the utilization of this electrical energy. Though another important aspect is about the power quality related to, because we don't have a so much grid. I mean, when we talk about not only abnormality of the typically related to in the grid, like there are non-linear load, but another is the interruption of the grid, another is the interruption, I mean, you can call it intermittency of the generation, like solar and wind, intermittency of the load. And then there is another dimension added, which is very important for such subcontinent like India, the interruption, that is also another intermittency to handle. I mean, such a situation like kind of a generation and then utilization and all these systems very properly with the intelligence of typically put computer and communication into it, including the several products which I mentioned, like electric vehicle, home appliances, which runs around electrical electronics and computers. There is a very heavy need for the research and improvement all those products, with the not only with the improvement in technology but disruptive technology coming up requirement of this. So of course we are in a very bad situation of epidemic, but we look into positive aspect. Probably the researcher will be finding a very good way finding these conferences. And I really thanks to our IEEE, all the dignitaries. I mean, they have taken a time with us and showed the importance and kept the importance of such conferences, that in this subcontinent we are able to do. I like to certainly thank, I mean, organizers and all those who are present and giving me opportunity to certainly share my view with you. Thank you very much. I mean, also back to organizer.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time with us and your marvelous preparation amongst us. I'll now request our guest of honor, Professor Paul M. Cunningham, Executive Director, ISG Africa Institute, and IEEE Division 6 Director, Electricals. I now request Honorable Sir to kindly take over and begin with his session.
Agwinushla Akorja. It is my great pleasure to join you this year's IEEE International Conference on Computing Power and Communication Technologies. As many of you know, Division 6 societies address horizontal issues relevant to many thematic areas within the broad context of science, technology, innovation, and engineering, including computing, power, and communication technologies. There are 7 Division 6 societies: IEEE Education Society, IEEE Industrial Electronics Society, Safety Engineering Society, Professional Communications Society, Reliability Society, Society on Social Implications of Technology, and Technology and Engineering Management Society. As Director-elect Division 6, I invite you to explore collaboration opportunities with our sister societies and Division 6 as a whole. Based on my professional and volunteer work in resource-constrained environments, particularly in an African context, interoperability and standards, technology convergence, adoption and adaptation of appropriate technologies, and working in strategic partnership with key stakeholder groups, particularly governments and local communities, to co-design data-driven, scalable, adaptable, and sustainable solutions addressing, as described so elegantly by Professor Sharma, Secretary of the Indian Department of Science and Technology, unfulfilled needs and desires, are essential considerations to ensure that we address cross-border societal challenges in a sustainable way, and ensure that women, youth, differently abled, and other disadvantaged groups at a micro level, and less developed economies at a macro level are enfranchised and empowered to take advantage of, as well as take responsibility for the generational leapfrogging and socioeconomic opportunities that appropriate technological innovation can provide. On Sunday, I look forward to contributing to this year's conference in a personal capacity rather than as Division 6 Director-elect, discussing some of the issues, challenges, and opportunities we should all consider in the context of the fourth industrial revolution and sustainable development, the role of technology and innovation. I look forward to exploring opportunities with you following the conference to collaborate in ensuring that as we contribute to the evolution of the fourth industrial revolution, we learn from how previous industrial revolutions evolved to identify and mitigate as much as possible potential unintended and unanticipated negative societal challenges, and maximize positive societal challenges of accelerated technology adoption, both for the human race and the planet. Gurav Mila Mahakat.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for joining in with us. And moving on to the next segment, we have a very special guest, Dr. Nishad Mendes, DNVGL, Australia, and Technical Chair, IEEE GUCON 2020. I now request Honorable Sir to kindly take over and begin with this session.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation, and noting the time constraints, I'll make it very short as much as possible. As one of the technical chairs of the conference, as well as IEEE IAS board member, I'm very thrilled to see the amount of quality of papers that we received, and it was indeed a very thoughtful task to select the best papers among those submitted. By looking at the statistics presented by Professor Saad, it is not hard to understand that our engineering community's enthusiasm and the passion for undertaking research and their motivation to share the knowledge through our virtual conference platform, even under the global pandemic condition. I would like to take this opportunity to thank every one of you, especially to the authors who spent their valuable time in submitting a paper and showing their special interest for this conference. I wish an extreme, very fruitful conference, and I hope once the conference finishes, you will be able to be as praised as you will start off the conference. Thank you very much.
Sarvanan sir, can you give formal vote of thanks?
A very good evening to all. On behalf of GUCON 2020, the third IEEE International Conference of Power, Computing, Communication and Technologies, for giving me the opportunity to express my gratitude on this special day. I feel very proud to thank our Honorable Sri Dhruv Galgotia ji, CEO, Galgotias University, for his constant support throughout the series of conferences. Sir has supported it all the way to carry out this event every year. Thank you so much, sir. I thank our most respected Professor Dr. Preeti Bajaj, Vice Chancellor, Galgotias University, who is the backbone of this conference in all the way. Thank you, ma'am. It's my immense pleasure to thank our today's chief guest, Professor Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary, Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, New Delhi, for his readily acceptance of our invitation and join us with his busiest schedule. Thank you, sir, for your very valuable address, which direct our researchers to work on the need of power in advanced technologies, which helps the nation development in all the way. Thank you, sir. I thank our technical chair, IEEE GUCON 2020, Professor Sir McAuliffe, Professor, Electrical Engineering, University of Malaya, for his support throughout the journey of GUCON 2020. Thank you, sir. I thank our guest of honor, Manford Pitt J. Schindler, FIEEE, Independent Consultant, Chief Technology Officer, Unlock Tech Limited, and IEEE Director Electrical for Division 4 for his valuable address on the importance of technological development. Thank you, sir. I extend my hearty thanks to our guest of honor, Professor Fred, FIEEE Professor, the Faculty of Engineering, Science and Aalborg University, Denmark, for your valuable address and your presence. Thank you, sir. I thank our next guest, Dr. Thomas, Technical Director, Guns Skoda Electric Limited, Budapest, Hungary, for your presence and well wishes and endeavor towards the conference. Thank you, sir. Next, I thank our guest, Dr. Dejan, FIEEE Distinguished Technologist, our Labs USA, for addressing the importance of IEEE in the role of every researcher and future technology predictors. Thank you, sir. I'm very thankful to our beloved professor, Dr. Beam Singh, FIEEE Professor, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, who is always our guide and direct us in a path of research and development towards the electric vehicle and renewable energy. Thank you, sir. Next, I would like to thank our guest, Professor Paul M. Chinningham, Executive Director, IST South Africa Institute, Africa Institute, and IEEE Division 4 Director Electrical. Thank you, sir, for your valuable remarks. I thank our one more technical chair, Dr. Nishad Mendes, for his guidance throughout our GUCON 2020 journey. Once again, I want to state that we all are most grateful to all the speakers on this stage, and we thank you for being with us in this evening. It has been a great pleasure to all. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Ogni, continue.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And I now hand over to Atwell Kanjanda and Koder Tanaka for our next segment of the keynote speeches. I suppose we'll be starting that session very soon with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.